Okay, good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing today? Good. Thank you for coming out in this lovely Michigan weather. For those of you who I have not met before, I'm David Mulder. I'm the training manager for ORSP and sponsored programs, and I am part of the Navigate team that is putting on the Lunch and Learn event today. And I'm joined by, I think this is all of us, right? Participating in one way or another, manning the ship, or staffing the ship, I should say. Okay. Hopefully everyone here today is interested in learning more about an overview of the National Institutes of Health, or NIH. Just a word of warning. I know that other support and foreign influence are kind of hot topics right now. We're not going to be going into them in any particular detail. Today's session really is intended to be an overview of the NIH as an agency in general. But given that it is such a topic of interest at the moment, we thought we would just at least touch on some of the information that's been presented recently at the town hall sessions that Mike Imperiali and Craig Reynolds and some other folks have been presenting. So really we stole this information from their presentations, but just wanted to remind everyone that from those town halls, one of the things that they're emphasizing is faculty responsibilities in regard to international engagement. Do as much as you can to stress to your faculty members that they should familiarize themselves with funding agency and U of M policies. And the biggest one probably is, of course, disclose. Disclose all of your activities and affiliations in MN. Also, do register for foreign travel. If you're not familiar with registering for foreign travel through U of M's travel registry, you can find out more information linked from the foreign engagement website. Be sure to expand your knowledge of export controls if you think that's something that might pertain to you or your faculty members' research. And in particular, in regard to export controls, don't bring electronic devices with sensitive data outside of the US. And while you're doing all those things, still provide a welcoming environment for foreign visitors. The slides for today's session will be posted to the Navigate Lunch and Learn site later on, and so you can link to either this slide or to the international engagement website from this slide. Also, just a reminder of how NIH defines other support, which I'm sure everyone knows, and website from this slide. Also, just a reminder of how NIH defines other support, which I'm sure everyone was probably scratching their heads over during the recent January request to update other support. But just remember that all resources that an investigator can access and are potentially related to research, not just grants and contracts, but anything that directly supports the research is considered other support, as well as financial and in-kind support or non-financial support from another institution or government. That includes salary, lab support, travel funding, etc. It's support available to you at other institutions, not just the University of Michigan. It includes high-value materials like antibodies, transgenic or knockout mice, etc., that are not freely available to everyone. And also includes non-monetary, non-material resources like lab staff, students, and their salaries paid by other non-U of M entities, and the funds are not awarded to U of M. So, with that very large caveat in mind, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to our presenters today, who are really the ones who know everything. No pressure. Our speakers today are Stacy Althouse, who is the Director of Research Administration in Ophthalmology and Visual Sciences and works over at the Kellogg Building, and Daniela Marchaletta, who is a project representative on the government sponsored team upstairs in the Office of Research and Sponsored Projects. So please bear with us. Because we are.
Thank you all for joining us here today, and for everyone who's on line, thank you for joining us. Today's discussion, here's a little agenda of what we're going to discuss. I'm going to provide an overview of NIH in general, discuss programs and the key people, and Daniela will be providing tips on budgeting and some common post-award issues. And I would like to ask that you guys hold all your... Okay, NIH at a glance. Their mission is to seek fundamental knowledge about the nature and behavior of living systems and the application of that knowledge to enhance health, lengthen life, and reduce illness and disability. So just some fun facts. NIH was created in 1887 as a one-room lab in Staten Island at the Marine Hospital Service. They were officially designated as NIH by Congress in 1930. They are now the world's largest source of medical research funding. They have about 100 plus inventions per year, and 156 Nobel Prize winners have received funding from NIH. The state of Michigan in fiscal year 18 received 1,740 awards, equivalent to $766 million. Their fiscal 19 operating plan was $39 billion, which was a 5.5% increase over fiscal year 18. 5% increase over fiscal year 18. This is NIH at a glance. NIH rolls up under the Department of Health and Human Services and the Office of the Secretary. They're comprised of 21 institutes and 6 centers. Each of those focuses on a disease or a specific body system. All the institutes and centers have their own priorities and budgets. They're located in Bethesda, Maryland, on 300 acres in a campus-like setting of 75 buildings. And the current director is Francis Collins. He was appointed by President Obama in 2019. Before his position with NIH, he was a Howard Hughes medical investigator here at U of M and worked on the Human Genome Project. So the people at a glance. NIH has a scientific review officer and a program official. The SRO reviews applications assigned to their review group and determines if the group is appropriate. They reassign applications as necessary. They recruit reviewers and ensure scientific expertise is represented in review groups. They make sure applications are complete, serve as the government official at the review meeting, check the accuracy of scores in ERA Commons, produce the summary statements, and work with program officials when PIs appeal their review. Program officials develop research and training initiatives and write funding opportunity for their institutes and centers. They are scientists. They provide guidance to PIs and interact with the community to assess research needs. They make funding recommendations and monitor scientific performance on active projects. The grants management specialist at NIH is the business official. These folks review the applications. The grants management specialist at NIH is the business official. These folks review the applications for administrative compliance, negotiate awards, and interpret grant policies. They work with grants management specialists to monitor the day-to-day business management of the grant. The authorized organizational representatives are the ORSP signing officials delegated by the University of Michigan. It's important to note that all communication must go to the grants management officials directly from the AOR. Proposal development and submission. So within the centers and institutes, NIH organizes their research into programs and activity codes. It's important to note that not all institutes and centers participate in all programs, so pay attention to the funding opportunity announcement. Most programs allow for a variety of applications on new, resubmission, renewal, or change of instructions for all programs and is organized by proposal type. Solicitations may differ from these instructions, and in this case, the solicitation should be followed. This slide provides an overview of the programs at NIH, and we're going to talk about these in more detail. So within the R series, there are several activities. The R01 is the Research Project Grant Program. This is the oldest mechanism at NIH. It supports specific projects which can be investigator-initiated or solicited by a request for applications. Almost all institutes and centers fund R01s. Generally, there is no budget ceiling, but prior approval is required for budgets greater than or equal to $500,000 direct costs per year. Note that this amount can be exceeded by the amount of a subcontractor's indirect costs. These are awarded for 1 to 5 years, and renewals are allowed. These are awarded for 1 to 5 years, and renewals are allowed. The R21 Exploratory Developmental Research Grant Award encourages development of new activities in program areas. This is used to support early research at the conceptual stage, such as high-risk, high-reward research that can lead to breakthroughs. Preliminary data is not required. These are limited to $275,000 direct cost over 2 years and cannot be renewed. Also in the R series is the R34 Clinical Trial Planning Grant. This program provides support for initial development of a clinical trial, including development of the team and the protocol. R34s permit early review of rationale and concept. Renewals are not permitted, and the budget is limited to $450,000 direct cost over 3 years. The R43 and 44 Small Business Innovation Research Program was established in 1982 by Congress. This supports research and technological innovation, establishes merit and feasibility of ideas that have potential for commercialization. The R4142 Small Business Technology Transfer Program was established 10 years later in 1992. It's similar to the SBIR, but requires the small business to formally collaborate with research institutions. In both of these programs, the research is conducted in phases, and U of M acts as a subcontract. The P Series Program Project Center Grants. The P01 supports multidisciplinary long-term programs. These programs are organized into groups of scientists, each conducting projects with common themes and led by established investigators. The programs have a central broad focus, and the direct cost limit is listed in the funding opportunity announcement. P30 Center Core Grant supports shared resources and facilities for research from different disciplines to specific disease. P50s are typically developed in response to specific institute and center needs, and once awarded, they may serve as a regional or national resource. NIH participates in cooperative agreements, the U01. These support specific projects that have substantial input from the institute and center. Typically, there is no budget ceiling. The K Series prepares investigators for careers in research. These career development awards typically support 75% effort for the investigator, plus a specified amount of other direct costs, which varies by institute and center. The K01 supports basic scientists, and the K08 clinician scientists. The K23 supports clinician scientists whose research is focused on patients. They also offer what is called a K12, and this is a program awarded to the institution that allows the program director at U of M. K3 supports clinician scientists whose research is focused on patients. They also offer what is called a K12, and this is a program awarded to the institution that allows the program director at U of M to appoint scientists in slots, similar to a T32. The T32, however, allows the director to appoint pre- and postdoctoral fellows. NIH also offers an F31 for pre-docs and an F32 for postdoctoral support. It's important to note on the TNF that you should request full amount of tuition and let NIH cut at the time of award. Finally, an important note on K, T, and F series. Individuals applying for these grants must be U.S. citizens or green card holders at the time the appointment begins. NIH uses parent announcements, program announcements, requests for applications, and requests for proposals to solicit applications. The funding opportunity announcement or investigator-initiated applications. Program announcement identify institute and centers areas of increased priority. A request for application identifies a narrowly defined area of research. And requests for proposals solicit contract proposals. Funding opportunity announcements and program announcements are accepted on standard deadlines when requests for applications and proposals have a specified deadline. So within the announcement, NIH will specify a due date or indicate that the standard deadlines are used. So this link provides access to this chart, which gives you the deadlines by activity code. Note that all applications are due by 5 p.m. on the specified due date, and that new applications may have a different deadline than renewals or resubmissions. So for example, on this chart, a new R01 for cycle 1 is due February 5th, while a renewal R01 for cycle 1 is due 1 month later on March 5th. for cycle 1 is due 1 month later on March 5th. NIH offers an advantage to their regular reviewers. This continuous submission policy provides members of review groups the benefit of submitting applications at any time in response to active funding opportunities that follow the standard due dates. Note that if your PI wants their grant reviewed during a certain cycle, there are associated due dates, and we provide that link here. NIH maintains a list of reviewers eligible for continuous submission. And note that applications under this policy should include a cover letter. This link, NIH provides this chart for applications submitted under the standard deadlines. This shows when the scientific review and the advisory council are met and provides your earliest project start date. Note, however, that a separate review and award cycle. The initial review is conducted by scientific review panels. This is comprised of non-federal scientists and organized by the scientific review officer. Reviewers prepare a written critique of each proposal assigned and assign a numerical score of 1 to 9, exceptional to poor, based on significance, investigator, innovation, approach, and environment. Proposals that are recommended for funding by the scientific review panel are then reviewed by the advisory council. This group is made up of scientists from the research community and public representatives. Members of the advisory board are chosen by the Institute and Center and approved by the Department of Health and Human Services. This group reviews the applications discussed during the peer review process in light of the Institute and Center's priorities, and funding decisions are made by the director of the Institute or Center. NIH uses these 4 systems for submission, most commonly grants.gov through eResearch system to system. Systems for submission, most commonly grants.gov through eResearch system to system. They also use Assist, which is used for multi-project applications. Just a tip that can be cumbersome, so plan ahead. ERA Commons is used sometimes for the submissions of supplements, and sometimes they accept through email. So the roles on NIH proposals, they do allow for a multi-principal investigator submission. So you have the program director or principal investigator, which could be more than one. Note that they do not recognize the NSF term co-PI though. So everyone on a multiple PI application would be designated as a PI. Those folks are the individuals having full responsibility for the project. They do allow also, of course, co-investigators. These people make significant contributions to the project, but do not have overall responsibility or authority. Additional key personnel are also allowed, and these folks contribute to the design, conduct, and reporting of the research. For a multi-PI application, it's important to note that one will be designated on the PAF as the contact PI, but both will need to sign. And so then just a couple notes about Biosketches. NIH asks that Biosketches are included for anyone designated as key personnel. They are limited to 5 pages and must include foreign affiliations such as positions or honors. They must include a personal statement, which is relevant to the project being submitted, and you can include up to 4 publications within this section. They also include up to 5 contributions to science, each with up to 4 publications. And then it's important to note that the research support section on the Biosketch is limited to current projects and those completed within the research support section on the Biosketch is limited to current projects and those completed within the last 3 years, and they do not reference effort or money. The Biosketch link provides a blank template and a good example of how a Biosketch should be formatted, and ORSP asks that you pay attention to the formatting. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to Daniela. She's going to discuss budgeting pre-award and some post-award tips and tricks.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out again today in this wonderful weather that we're having outside. I'm just going to go over a few issues or questions that ORSP commonly sees. I'll point them out when we're talking about different parts of the proposal and the awards that we receive. There's one question that comes up often on the human subjects and clinical trials form when you're filling out your application. And that question is, does this project involve human specimens and/or data? Oftentimes, ORSP sees people answering this question as no, when the proposal or the path is clearly indicating that human specimens are being used. So we just ask that you check with your PI and make sure you double check that question to update it to yes if it's appropriate. If human specimens or data are being used, then NIH requires an explanation as to why this is not use and human subjects research. The explanation can be really short. It doesn't have to be very detailed, but it does need to be there in the application. There's another link on this page to the human subjects decision tree. If you're having, or your investigator is having, there are two types of budgets. There's the modular budget and then a more detailed budget. Modular budgets are used when the project is requesting up to $250,000 in direct costs per year, and that excludes the consortium IDC. That's not what you need to include when calculating that cap. You still need to read the solicitation, though, even if you're only requesting $250,000 or less, because it might ask for a more detailed budget, and you can't use the modular forms. For the modular budgets, you will request in increments of $25,000, and these budgets only require the personnel justification and a consortium justification. You might also have an additional narrative justification in there, which can explain variations in the modules that you requested, or if there's equipment we talked about. The other type of budget is the more detailed budget, where you're requesting more than $250,000 in direct costs per year. Proposals that are requesting greater than or equal to $500,000 in direct costs per year, you'll actually need to get approval before you can submit those. It's really wise to seek approval early, probably 6 weeks in advance. If you don't seek approval, those proposals will be rejected. So it's really important to remember to do that. There have been a few that have been rejected because approval wasn't sought beforehand. One thing to note on that, your consortium F&A costs are not included as part of the $500,000 cap. So it also doesn't apply the cap to, and it's on that slide. Things to keep in mind when you're preparing your budget, the GSRI request, you should put some language in there indicating that 6 months is considered full-time effort at U of M, because that can cause confusion for the grants management specialists when they see, sometimes we'll see 50% effort, or just indicating to them that 6 months is our full-time effort. Another thing to look at, participant support costs. These are rare on NIH awards, but you might see them come up from time to time. Participant support costs are not for U of M employees. So NIH has imposed a salary cap, which is currently set at $197,300. That's the maximum allowed on any NIH grant. So the links there will help you in terms of if you have questions to calculate your person months or salary. Also throughout the presentation, there's a lot of links included. It's just because there's a lot of content for NIH and it's hard to go over everything. We kind of had to pick and choose what to talk about and what to focus on. So all the links should be working, and then have fun going in and seeing what's in there. There's some other things to keep in mind. Some proposals require a certification, the DHHS certification. These are for K99 proposals where the sponsor PI is not the same as the U of M PI. We'll just need that in the proposal documents before it comes to ORSP, before we can approve it. This is a signature allowing the applicant to certify that the application is accurate. This is a signature allowing the applicant to certify that the application is accurate and that any fraudulent statements are subject to criminal penalties. Another letter that might come up are the letters from the AORs, and those are letters from our department, from ORSP. So if you need a letter from the AOR, we do ask that you first finalize your proposal and submit it to our office at first. The PIs should sign those letters. We will co-sign at ORSP and then give it back to you to add to your proposal. A different letter that you might need are for the S10 applications. These regard instrument usage, and we do have that letter on file. So you can ask us once again after you finalize the proposal. We will provide that letter to you to include in it. So just a few things to keep in mind with the proposal and what's required in there. You do need a project summary that's limited to 30 lines of text. Project narrative. In terms of the ERA Commons username, the credential field is required on the senior key personnel profile. The facilities and equipment document, that should not reference money at all. The university does not want to be kind of liable, put on the hook for additional funds that we have sort of included in that document, but didn't know we were talking about. So we don't want to have to foot the bill for something we didn't realize we were agreeing to pay for. So just don't put any dollar amounts in there. There's also the data sharing plan. That's required in proposals that request greater than or equal to $500,000 in direct costs per year, or the solicitation might specifically ask for a data sharing plan. So even if you don't have $500,000 or more, you still might have to include it. Other things to keep in mind. One resubmission is allowed within 37 months. Other things to keep in mind. One resubmission is allowed within 37 months of the original submission, but you must wait for the summary statement from the original application. The PI must wait for that before they can resubmit. And duplicate or highly overlapping applications cannot be under review at the same time. When you're filling in the federal identifier number, you'll use the 2 letters and then the 6 numbers, and that's required for the renewals, the resubmissions, or revision applications. You'll also need to put in as an other attachment if you're using the foreign justification, if you're collaborating internationally. So time to move on to post-submission. There are a few items that are allowable post-submission that can be sent on to NIH. I provided the link. There are a few items that are allowable post-submission that can be sent on to NIH. I provided the link in there so you can see which documents are actually allowable. If it's not one of the documents listed in there, NIH will not accept them. Some common ones that we see a lot are the news of a professional promotion or positive tenure decision for any PI. Those they will accept, or news of an article that's been accepted for publication. And when you submit those to ORSP, you can only include the list of authors and institutional affiliations, the title of the article, and the journal or citation. Any other information will not be accepted. And if you try and submit other types of documents to NIH, they just won't accept them, they'll reject them and say that they will not add them to the file. So on to JIT time. An applicant request includes other support documents. These documents should include overlap statements. The effort listed on these documents should not say 0 or 0%. If it says 0, the grant specialist will have follow-up questions and want to know how you're contributing 0 effort to all these projects you've been listed on. So even if it's a really small amount of effort, just please list that on there, 1%, just to show them that you're following the guidelines. And of course, support from foreign entities should be listed as well. So another JIT request includes your human subjects education. If the project involves human subjects, then you would submit the peer certifications are acceptable to submit to ORSP, and we will forward them on to the sponsor. If it's human subjects, then you would submit the peer certifications are acceptable to submit to ORSP, and we will forward them on to the sponsor. If you're using human subjects, we'd also ask for the IRB approval date. We don't actually need the letter of approval, just the date, because that's what gets entered into ERA Commons. The same thing goes for the animal use and IACUC approval. You just need the date to go in there to the sponsor. Another item that can come up at JIT time are the genomic data institutional certifications. And that's something that ORSP cannot just sign without approval from the IRB first. So the project teams will have to request or contact the IRB to talk about that form. Once you've talked about it, the IRB will actually contact ORSP directly via posted comment in the path. Let us know that it's okay to actually sign that form, and we can forward it on. You'll also need to provide other support for the subs, so making sure that you have that from them as well. Just a note too, when filling out the paths, if you'll have a subcontract with another university and that university will be doing human subjects or animals work, then you should mark yes on our path that human subjects work is being done or animal work is being done, even if it's not any part of that work is being done at U of M. We are now on to award time. Things to know at award time. Key personnel, those are the individuals named on the notice of award. So oftentimes at proposal time, the PIs will list a lot of individuals as senior key personnel. But in terms of what NIH is thinking, only the people listed on that NOAA are the key personnel. It's about fellowships, F31s, F32s. All fellowships require an activation notice. These activation notices must be signed by the fellow and the sponsor. They have to be wet signatures, so we cannot accept an email back to us with the signatures. They'll either have to be dropped off to ORSP or put in the mail because the sponsor won't accept it. So another thing to note, the fellows can't enter duty between the months of October or November, so you have to pick a date on there that they can start that are not in those months. In addition to the activation notice, it also might require a payback agreement. These do not have to go through ORSP. The postdoc can submit those directly. We ask that you actually don't email these or put them in ERPM or because there's social security numbers on those forms, and we have to get ITS involved to kind of strip ERPM from that with that information. Forms, and we have to get ITS involved to kind of strip ERPM from that with that information. On to training grants, T32s, T34s. These require the use of XTrain and ERA Commons for activation and termination. The terminations are handled by sponsored programs, not ORSP. So if you have any questions, please call up to them. There's also a link on here regarding XTrain that is helpful to look at. I also included a link on how to decipher NIH applications and grant numbers. So if you're new to this, I found this to be really helpful when I started. That's really handy just to click on. I think that's it for award. We're going to go on to post-award management. So the biggest question that we get is, when is prior approval needed? The approval matrix, which is hosted by NSF. There's the link to the website to look at. It divides it between the different sponsors, NSF, NIH, NASA. If you've consulted that, there's another handy link to look at as well. You can also look at the ORSP's website regarding PAC-Rs. It gives you information about what you might need for different post-award requests. In terms of when prior approval is needed, a change in scope always requires the prior approval of the sponsor. So there are a few examples of what a change in scope would be. One of them would be significant rebudgeting. And this is oftentimes a big question that we get from project teams is, I want to rebudget, do I need approval? Well, the sponsor says you do need approval if it's significant. And what is significant to them is when you have expenditures in a single direct cost budget category, deviating from the categorical commitment level for that budget period by 25% or more of the total costs awarded. So if you have $200,000 in total costs awarded for that first budget period, if you want to decrease it $50,000 or more in that same budget period in that category, in any category, you need approval. Other times when you need approval, if there's a change in senior or key personnel, and those are the people that are listed on the NOAA, or a reduction of effort of 25% or more. And that requires a letter to the sponsor. There are some other instances on here when you would need prior approval. Another big one is if there are any changes in the specific aims approved at the time of the award. You also need prior approval for the addition of a foreign sub. Apply to a domestic sub, we don't need prior approvals for those. This slide just talks about a couple other times where you might need to get prior approval. If there's a change in the approved involvement of human subjects that would result in an increased risk, you'll need to get approval for that. And that link below takes you to the grants policy statement that talks about when you might need approvals. So on to post-award, no-cost time extensions. In those requests for extensions, we're providing an explanation as to why the project could not be completed in the time allotted. One item that you'll need for the no-cost extension is your unobligated balance. One thing to note is that you cannot request a no-cost extension if you do not have any funds remaining. So we'll get a lot of requests, and in the documents it will say we don't have anything left, but we still need the extension to finish the publication or something like that. We can't approve those requests. The extensions are due by the end date of the budget, how you're going to use the funds. The second extension will need to be approved by the sponsor and submitted in the sponsor system. Another post-award request is the carry forward request. I know there were some questions online about carry forward and how those work. The biggest thing to remember for carry forward is that the sponsor wants to know what from the prior year still needs to be done. Carry forward requests are routinely being denied now. The sponsors are asking for more information all the time and are not accepting, the first email, the second email, the third email. They really want to know why you couldn't get it done. These requests also have to be include budgets on the specific PHS 2590 or PHS 398 forms. A lot of times people will send in an Excel file and say, can we just submit that over? And the sponsor wants to see those actual forms. So we have to send it back to the project teams. There also is that we just submit that over, and the sponsor wants to see those actual forms. So we have to send it back to the project teams. There also is a checklist that needs to be included. Also, if there's a sub on the project, you'll have to include their budgets as well on those same forms. So the requests for carryover can't be approved by the sponsor until the federal financial report is approved, the FFR. So ORSP cannot submit these requests over to the sponsor until the FFR has been submitted over. And that's a common question that we get. So on to equipment. There is a distinction between the general purpose equipment and the special purpose equipment. One thing to know about the general purpose equipment, requests should not be listed as direct costs for general purpose equipment unless there's primarily or exclusively used in the actual coverage. I think we'll skip on over past the equipment one. We have a page on UG monitored costs, and I know that, David, you have a session for UG costs. We won't talk too much about that. But in terms of UG, in order to charge as a direct cost, you need to provide a justification as to how the item constitutes an unlike circumstance. So thinking about computers as an example, an acceptable justification would be the computer is necessary to control or monitor certain scientific equipment used in the project. An unacceptable justification would be, I need a computer to prepare presentations. On to more post-award. Some requests here for pre-award costs. These are common requests. We will need sponsor approval if your requests for pre-awards are for transfer awards, non-competing. We don't actually need to get sponsor approval if it's greater than 90 days, so that can be done internally. Even if it is less than 90 days, you will still need to submit a PAC R to ORSP so we can approve the request for pre-award costs. And no pre-award costs are allowed for training grants or fellowships. Another post-award change, the PI change request that always requires sponsor approval. It will need the signature of the new and old PI in the letter request. And you also need the Biosketch and other support for the new PI. Participant support costs, which are rare, those can't move, money can't move in or out of budget categories without sponsor approval. And an important note with any of these post-award changes and sponsor prior approvals, if it's a multi-PI project, we need the signature from all PIs on that award, even if it's a sub. PIs on that award, even if it's a sub. So we will unfortunately have to send it back if all signatures are not on the document. So on to RPPRs. There are a lot of resources here for the RPPRs. There's a link to due dates. There's the instructional guide. Oftentimes people call up and ask, how do I fill out the RPPRs? What do I put in this section? And I will send over the instruction guide and reference certain pages. It's really helpful in general. And there's also, I believe I included an FAQ regarding the reporting requirements. So one question I think that was asked by the project teams that you wanted us to touch on is how ORSP handles the RPPRs, the annual versus final, and how to request they be submitted. For the annual RPPRs, a member of our office will post project teams a comment and say, please fill out the keep personnel form and post back the information to us when you're ready to submit the RPPR. So if your RPPR is ready to go, please just post a comment in ERPM and we'll get it out to you. If it's a final RPPR, we do ask that you initiate an ACR in ERPM to get that information over to us. The final RPPRs are due 120 days after the end of the project, along with the final invention statement. So before routing over the RPPRs, the final RPPRs, you can check for errors and then route it to the SO. So some common questions that come up with the RPPRs involve section D.1 on the RPPR. The question is individuals that have worked on the project, you're supposed to list them. So in that section, you need to report on individuals that have worked on the project for greater than 1 month during the last budget period, minus any approved no-cost extensions. One other thing to note for RPPRs, grad students have to have an ERA Commons ID. And another thing about the budget in terms of the RPPR, you need to provide a justification for your unobligated balance amount on that RPPR. If you say you don't have an unobligated balance and you do, there's going to be a lot of questions from the grants management specialists. So if there was an issue with the RPPR, if the grants management specialist found an issue in there, they'll have you route a PRAM or a FRAM. A PRAM just stands for Progress Report Additional Materials. The FRAM stands for Final Report Additional Materials. The PI will need to log in and route these, the PRAM route these, the PRAM or the FRAM, and then attach the requested documents. Once he attaches those, or he or she attaches those, can route that on over to the SO, and then we at ORSP will submit. RA should also initiate an ACR and ERPM to let us know that they're ready to submit that PRAM or FRAM. The reason why most, or oftentimes a lot of PRAMs or FRAMs are initiated involves the My NCBI PDF reports. NIH requires that. So if an awardee lists a paper in section C.1 of an RPPR, then they are responsible for its compliance with the NIH public access policy. And under this policy, publications must be in 4 states to be compliant. These states are complete, PMC journal in process, or not applicable, or NA. The RPPRs will not be accepted, and they'll initiate the FRAM or FRAM requests if it is not in those states. So you might see on the your report where it says non-compliant, that will then require the params or frams. And it's not something where the RPPR can't be originally routed. It'll go through the system with those non-compliant reports in there. It's just they're going to request more information from you anyways, and it'll hold up future year fundings if you don't get those publications in compliance. So in terms of who can help you out with that, unfortunately, they know how to work those, how to get them compliant for you, and they'll be really helpful. There's also a list of very helpful websites for the PIs to look at as well in terms of those reports and how to get them compliant, and just questions in general that I refer people to regularly. So those are included as well. One more slide of just things to know. The most important thing to know is that all prior approval requests need approval from the grants management specialist. Approval from the program official is not sufficient. So oftentimes we'll be told, oh, the PO said it's okay to do this, but unless the grants management specialist has said okay, it's not valid. Another thing to know is that ORSP strongly recommends that the PI not discuss any administrative issues with their program officer. And the last thing, a comment from Terry Maxwell that she wanted everybody to know is that officer. And the last thing, a comment from Terry Maxwell that she wanted everybody to know is that cost sharing is not an advantage for peer review. And here are just a few websites that can be really helpful. Included them in the slide deck. About 2 pages of them for any questions that you might have that we could think of